Okay, so we're here with Susan Murray, and we're going to be discussing relationships, how to have healthy relationships, and what it means to have a healthy relationship. I'll let Susan introduce herself a little bit, tell us about what she does and who she is, and a little bit about her background. And we're both good friends, so we've talked about this before, and we work in some ministries that deal with relationships as well. So introduce yourself to us a little bit, Susan, and then we'll start our discussion.
Okay, well, I'm Susan Murray. Legally, I'm Susan Smart. I grew up here in the mid-Missouri area, and I was a farm girl, and so that's why I majored in French, to get away from here. Went to France, didn't like France either, came back, and as my kids were getting older, I recognized that to understand how to do relationship, I was going to have to learn how to teach them to be healthy people. And so my interest in relationships and people and needs that people have, how to do healthy relationships, those got more and more important to me. And that kind of led then, when I went back to graduate school, counseling psychology became my focus.
How do a lot of relationships, it's not really necessarily a conflict of people doing really wicked things to one another. Mm-hmm. It's usually a dissolution on different levels. So you talked a little bit about loving yourself. How does loving yourself come into a role in a relationship? Because that seems like a selfish maneuver rather than a healthy maneuver.
Well, it seems selfish, and a lot of times Christians think that it is a selfish thing to love myself. But if we only focus on loving other people, we run ourselves empty. We just work for other people or for other causes. And if we're not aware of our own needs, then we're not telling anybody what we need. And unless we're with people who can read our minds, then we're going to find ourselves empty. And that then leads to exhausted, and that can go into bitter or totally frustrated.
So it's not a long-term strategy to just give from thinking that you have a endless.
I used to think that I had to just be the giver, and I had to just do for whoever needed something at the moment. And a lot of people have that impression. And the problem with that is sometimes we just run ourselves empty, but other times also we find ourselves being tricked by people who want to just use us. And sometimes it's to use us to get them what they want, kind of an easy way for them to get their needs met. Sometimes it's helping them sin, like somebody who wants somebody else to pay their bills, or wants somebody to be okay with them using drugs or alcohol or sex addiction.
So what are some things that people should keep in mind, maybe top of mind, things that they need to be emotionally honest with about self-love? Is it, how does one express one's needs without being selfish? Would be a good way to put that.
Well, if I'm going to say that my needs are more important than anybody else's, I will be selfish. However, if I don't even tell anybody that I have needs, then I'm assuming that nobody needs to take care of me, and that comes from an attitude of not respecting myself, not valuing myself, not loving myself. And the problem with that is that my cup will be empty before long, and I'll have nothing to give. If I try to give out of an empty cup, I can do that for a short amount of time, but sooner or later I will run myself into a depression, or I will run myself into anxiety, or I will run myself into wishing that I was a hermit.
Yeah.
And in order to, it's got to be, it talks about also in 2 Corinthians how there needs to be whoever has gives and whoever doesn't have receives. Just that balance of giving and receiving. You can think of it even as a 50-50 kind of balance.
Yeah, in Galatians it talks about bearing one another's burdens. It's not just
and thus fulfilling the law of Christ.
Yeah, not a singular one-sided thing. It's more of a loving dynamic that actually requires, because vulnerability is a point where I express my needs. And if I'm never vulnerable, that's not true. That's not a true relationship.
It's not being honest, and it's not being real. It's not being in touch with the real me or letting that person know who the real me is.
So the difference is between expressing my needs in a demanding way and expressing my needs in a open way. That
It's
would be
huge.
healthy. Yeah.
It's very huge.
Do people get stuck on an emotional level? Like they get stuck in a certain emotion and just say, well, this is what I'm feeling, when really there's something they really are feeling underneath that?
A lot of times they get stuck in anger and just doing something to release the anger. But underneath the anger, there's always something at a deeper level. It could be that I feel hurt. Maybe I feel left out. Maybe I feel helpless.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I feel rejected. Maybe I feel not wanted. There's some emotion under the anger. The only exception to that would be righteous anger, where the person around me is sinning.
Yeah, doing something evil. But
Yeah, and I'm angry like God would be angry, only obviously on a minor scale.
yeah. So
Yeah.
how does that work out when someone has that kind of that anger and finds that, because sometimes anger you think of it's pushing someone else away with loud words or like statements that are kind of engineered to hurt.
Maybe to demean or
But the irony is underneath what they're really wanting is to love and be connected with the person. So why does someone, use that anger to sort of like, cause disturbance in a relationship when really they want to connect?
Well, a lot of times, whatever the person is doing in response to their anger, they might isolate.
Okay.
Or they might
Like shut down and be quiet.
right, or leave, or they might yell, or they might hit, or they might get drunk. They're going to do something that they have learned gets them out of or takes care of that anger, but they're ignoring what the underlying emotional need is. Maybe if I've felt left out, I'll feel hurt, and I'll just feel irritated, and I'll just go home. Well, what if I had just said, does anybody want to hear my voice?
Men, women are always different. Even friendships are different. Like I want to have this level of friendship, and you don't, and so
Right.
we can't always mesh our expectations. So there's always going to be some dissonance there, I think, in every relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. And that person's needs matter and my needs matter, and how can we have a mutually beneficial relationship if I try to just ignore my needs and just try to love you? Well, sooner or later I'll recognize that I'm going to have to go someplace else to have my needs valued and respected. I might have to isolate and just be by myself for a while. If in order to love my neighbor as I love myself, I'm going to have to use my voice.
Yeah, but it's important to have not just one, but a lot of healthy relationships, so that on different levels you can,
Right.
because not every relationship will be able to supply all your needs
Absolutely.
and wants, and
Right.
that you have more options to go to other relationships to
Absolutely. And
to
that's
get
why
your cup filled when you need it, I guess.
Yeah, and that's why the Lord put us together as the body of Christ. There are these needs in this person, and these gifts, and these needs in this person, and these gifts, and somehow they just mesh together. And it's not going to be perfect until we're in heaven.
Yeah.
But it can work well if I value you and your needs, and you value me and my needs. If I value my needs and you value your needs, then because we can't read each other's minds.
Yeah.
Yeah, forgiveness is something that is a big deal. It's got to do with basically what it is and what it's not. Forgiveness is something that I do as a decision. It's not a feeling.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily a feeling. I might still feel somewhat angry even after I've decided to forgive, and the anger will go away with time. But it's choosing to let go of the anger, and it's not necessarily going to be trust. It's for my benefit that I'm going to forgive. It's not for the other person's benefit. I don't want to wear that for the rest of my life.
You don't. Do you have to even tell the other person that you're forgiven them?
The person might not even still be in this world.
Mm-hmm.
No, you don't have to say it in order to do it.
Mm-hmm.
You choose to let go of the anger, and basically it's something inside of me that it's not necessarily something between me and that person. And it's a decision that I have to renew as needed.
Yeah.
If they hurt me again, I have to forgive again. Or if I remember it again and I'm musing on it, then I need to forgive again.
Yeah.
It's something that's not a once for all time thing.
So a healthy relationship, and that, according to what we've kind of been discussing tonight, how would you characterize it in like three or four sentences or so in terms of like what we talked about in terms of needs, forgiveness, trust?
Well, basically, a healthy relationship, both people recognize that they individually matter and the
relationship matters.
Yeah, that person's needs are just as important as mine. Mine are just as important as that person's. And we both recognize that, and we both want to pursue
Creative fulfillment of both of those.
what's going to be good for both of us.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of us grew up not understanding how relationships are important and what it takes to have a good, solid, mutually beneficial relationship.
It takes a lot of work.
And that's why there's so many divorces in our world, because people just give up.
Yeah. But it's worth working.
And there are ways to make it happen.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks, Susan.
You're welcome.